Welcome to the Next Level Facebook Ads Podcast with Phil Graham. We help you master Facebook ads and give you an unfair advantage over your competition. Are you ready? Let's go.
What's up, podcast family? Welcome to the Next Level Facebook Ads Podcast, episode 399. That is so fitting. We're one away from 400 on December 31st, 2024. Happy New Year's Eve, my friends. I am so glad you're here. Today is going to be a fun episode. I'm going to do some frequently asked questions from you guys, from our listeners. And I also want to share the number one lesson from ads that I learned in 2024. Now, next week is going to be our first episode of the new year in 2025. And I'm going to be talking about why you should be going all in on Facebook and Instagram ads and how. So I'm so excited for that. But today, it's the last day of the year if you're listening to this when it comes out. So I wanted this to be kind of a chill episode. I also wanted to thank you guys for an amazing 2024, 399 episodes. I've been doing this for over 7 years, an episode every single week. And I truly appreciate you guys and love hanging out with you guys on this podcast. And also a big thank you to everybody that actually takes time to leave reviews on their podcast app of choice for this show. Thank you guys so much. So this will be a fun episode. Like I said, this is questions from you guys. I didn't just make these up out of thin air. They are directly from listeners, and I get these quite a bit. And I'm mixing in some specific ad questions along with some personal fun questions as well, just to mix it up, because why not? It's fun. Also, since I love AI, I'm going to have AI voice the questions. So the questions will be voiced by AI, which is not real, but the questions themselves are real from real people. So just keep that in mind. Now, before we jump in, if you guys are looking to get better at Facebook and Instagram ads in 2025, if you're looking to improve your ad game and learn more, or maybe you want somebody to run your ads for you so you don't have to worry about it as much and you can just do what you do best. For either one of those things, just go to my website, philgrahamdigital.com, or you can DM me on Instagram at philgrahamdigital, and I would love to connect with you. So before I jump into the questions, I've got a little PSA I want to cover with you guys. I think it's so important. You know, one of the things that I think is a huge advantage for me is that I really limit my distractions. And I work with so many different types of clients and also have friends, and I see how distracted people can get, especially online. And I actually had somebody come to me for consulting because they were struggling. And they talked about all these different courses and things they did. And they talked about a different community, which I won't name, but it's a community that has communities that teaches you how to sell a community to others who then teach their people how to sell a community, and on and on. It's like a classic MLM. And it didn't work for this person. It didn't work for a lot of people. They were frustrated. They wasted time. They wasted money. And so one of the things I was thinking about is that I think one of my advantages is just not getting distracted with that kind of stuff. And so looking into the new year, one of the things that I would recommend for you guys is to focus on learning things and doing things that make you better. And try and avoid all that crap that I just talked about, because there's a lot of it out there. There's a lot of BS out there too, I'll tell you that. That's why in this podcast, every single week, I try and bring a lot of value and actionable advice and information to you guys, because I try and counteract all the crap that's out there. So I hope you enjoy it. Just wanted to give you that little PSA. But now, with that being said, let's jump into the frequently asked questions on the last day of 2024.
Number 1, what's the best budget to start with for Facebook ads when I'm just testing?
The best budget to start with is a very loaded question that totally depends on many different factors and variables. It's impossible to answer without knowing you and your exact situation So I'm sure lots of you guys have this question, though. It's very common. So I'll try and give a general answer, as general as I can, but I'm just going to give an example. What you don't necessarily want to do is test at the very tippy top of your budget. Now, there are times and reasons why I might do that in certain situations, but for a lot of you guys, it's probably not the best way to go. So you have to figure out budget-wise, what are you comfortable spending on your ads? I'm just going to throw a random number out there. Pretend like the top number where you're okay spending, but $1 more, you start getting uncomfortable. Let's say that was $3,000 a month on ads. Let's just say, okay? If that were true, then if you don't have any winners right now, if you haven't been running ads and you're literally either starting from scratch or you've run ads and you haven't done very well, then what I would do in that scenario is I would probably start with about half that amount in my testing phase. I might go up to $2,000, but I wouldn't necessarily use the whole 3,000 in testing. I would be more likely to use 1,500 to $2,000 during that month to see if I can get something that's working. And then when I see what's working, then I can scale that and put more money into that. Now, there are alternatives and exceptions. If you really want data faster, because the more you spend, the quicker data you're going to get, that's a good reason why you might want to go higher in the budget. But in general, think of a number that you're comfortable with. Maybe use like 50 to 60% of that as testing, and then you can scale it once you see the data. Question number 2, and by the way, I don't know what these questions are. My assistant gathered them for me, fed them to AI for the voice part of them, but gathered them from you guys, from our emails and DMs and stuff. And I haven't seen them until now. So, that makes it more fun.
Number 2, what's a talent you have that most people don't know about?
I would say mixed martial arts. So I've been training for a lot of years, even back in the early days of the UFC before it got really big. And that's something that I'm very, very passionate about. And I love doing. So boxing, kickboxing, jujitsu, wrestling, all those types of things. I've got a good talent for that. And it's something I've done for a long time. And most people probably don't do it because it's not something I really talk about a lot, but I do love it. I love the sport and I love to train.
Number 3, what's the difference between a boosted post and a Facebook ad?
Oh, this is a great question. So a boosted post, in my analogy, is kind of like a slot machine at a casino. It's like the easiest thing to do, but it kind of has lower odds than some of the other things. So with a boosted post, yes, you're able to advertise a post, but in some ways you're limited to some of your options and some of the tracking and stuff like that. So for that reason, I never, ever, ever, ever boost a post. I always do normal ads through Ads Manager. Now, if you have a post that's done really well that you want to run as an ad, you don't have to boost it. You can go into Ads Manager and you can actually put the post ID in there as an actual ad, and you can still run that post as an ad. But by running it through the normal Ads Manager instead of boosting, you have any and every option available to you, all the tracking, and there's no downside to that compared to boosting. So I would never, ever recommend boosting. Always go through the normal Ads Manager and run ads that way.
Number 4, what's the last thing you watched or streamed that you loved?
What did I watch recently? Well, football is definitely something I love and I watch all the time. But, I think if you guys have been listening to this, you already know that. So I'll give you something else as well. I would say Desperate Housewives. No, definitely not Desperate Housewives. Totally kidding. Not a chance. I would say something that I've streamed recently is, I think it's an HBO miniseries called The Pacific. It's about war, and it is so well done. If you have not seen it, I highly recommend you check it out. You can stream it. I can't remember where, but it's on one of the major streaming platforms. Again, it's called The Pacific. I think it's like a 9 or 10 part series, and it is so well done. It is freaking amazing. So that's something that I definitely have watched recently and I love.
Question number 5. How important are Facebook ad metrics like CTR, click-through rate, and CPC, cost per click.
Facebook ad metrics are insanely important. So a lot of people only look at one thing, and that is the return on ad spend. And of course, that's important to look at, as is also the cost to get a customer or the cost per lead. Those are super important. But numbers that actually affect those important numbers are things like your click-through rate, your cost per click, and also your CPM. So you've got to pay attention to that, because you could be in a situation where, let's say your ads are starting to fail and you think there's a problem with the ad. But what if your CPM doubled? If that were the case, maybe there was nothing wrong with the ad, but just the cost went up because there's a lot more advertisers for a certain amount of time. How would you know if you didn't track it? Or maybe everything is the same, but the ad's just not doing good. Then you can kind of dig into it and figure out if it's the audience or the creative or something else. That's why you don't only look at return on ad spend or cost per lead or purchase. You look at some of these other things: CPMs, click-through rate, cost per click, frequency. All those things are super important. You want to make sure you're always keeping an eye on them.
Question number 6. What's the best way to split test Facebook ads to see which one performs better?
So there's a lot of different ways. Great question. There's a lot of different ways you can split test Facebook ads. You can do an A/B test right within Facebook. Here's how I like to do it though. When I test something, I literally want as equal comparisons as possible. So let's say we're testing one thing. Pretend like we're testing an image versus a video, for example. In my opinion, the best way to test that is to give it an ad set budget. So I would have 2 ad sets. Each ad set would have its own budget. They would be equal. They would be the same. Let's say we'll just use a random number, $20 a day for one, $20 a day for the other one. They would also be targeting the same audience. And yes, you're going to have some overlap there, but guess what? They're seeing 2 different ads. It's not going to be on there forever. So it's not the end of the world. It's going to help you know which one works better. Same audience, same budget. Each ad has its own ad set so that it's going to spend about the same amount per day. That's how you can get a good, much more accurate test than what I see most people do. What most people do is they'll put 2 different ads or 3 or 4 inside one ad set and let Facebook manage the budget. And one will have a reach of like 10,000 and one will have a reach of like 24. You can't compare those two. So when I'm doing split testing, they're going to have equal budgets going to the same place with the same ad copy, for example, in this situation. And the only difference would be a video versus an image. There's going to be typically just one variable, whether it's the creative or the ad copy or the hook or maybe the audience. And they're going to get about the same amount of impressions and reach every day and ad spend. And I'll be able to tell which one worked better. And that's how I recommend you guys split test your ads. And yes, there are a few exceptions, a few times where I might load up an ad set with a bunch of different things to test. But for most of you guys, I highly recommend testing in the way I just described, where there's just one variable with equal budgets. And now the last question, number 7, and then we'll finish it up with my number 1 lesson learned this year.
Question number 7. What's a hobby or activity you've always wanted to try but haven't yet?
Ooh, a hobby I've wanted to try or activity. Ooh, that's a good one. You guys are making me think. This is New Year's Eve. That's not very nice. I would say, this is kind of off the wall here, but I've always wanted to learn how to like build a house from scratch with my hands. And I feel like I could probably do that with YouTube, I think. And it'd be kind of cool. Someday I might do that. It just sounds like a total challenge. It's completely different than anything I normally do in life when it comes to marketing and ads and stuff like that. I think that would be something fun to learn, and just do it once and say that you did it and then live in it. How cool would that be? So I hope you guys enjoyed those questions. They were from you, and about once a quarter, once every 3 months or so, I do a new frequently asked questions episode. Anytime you guys have questions, whether you want them answered via DM quickly or you might just want them on the next Frequently Asked Questions show, you can DM me on Instagram at Phil Graham Digital, or shoot me an email. philgrahamdigital.com is the website. Now, before we go, I would say probably my number one lesson I've learned in 2024. It's tough to say number one because I learned a lot of things this year, but as it relates to ads, I would say probably the biggest one, which I already kind of knew, but it gets reinforced, is to never assume and always test and trust the data. There are so many times when people assume things, myself included. I've assumed things that something wasn't going to work or it was going to work. I don't assume anymore. Even if I have a gut feeling, which a lot of times is correct, I still test and make sure that the data backs that up. If you don't do that, I think you're setting yourself up for very possible failure, especially when it comes to running ads. So obviously you have to do some level of assumption in terms of what you're running and what your strategy is, but then you follow the data and you make adjustments based off of that data. You've got to give it enough time to run though. Don't cut it off too soon, because that's another big mistake. But I would say that lesson is don't just assume, always test and always trust the data. So my friends, thank you so much for an amazing 2024. I know that together we can make 2025 even better. And I think it's kind of fitting that next week, the first episode of 2025 will actually be my 400th episode of this podcast. That is a lot of shows. It's a lot of episodes every single week. And I absolutely love it. And I'm so glad that you've been along for the ride, whether you just found me or you've been listening for years. My friends, episode 399 is in the books, and actually 2024 is in the books. I'm so excited for the new year. Best wishes for your New Year's Eve and a happy, healthy, prosperous new year in 2025. And I am excited to talk to you guys next week, next Tuesday, with our first episode of 2025. And I will talk to you then. Peace out.
Thanks for listening to the Next Level Facebook Ads Podcast. Please remember to subscribe and share this with all your friends. For show notes, more tips, and to learn more about Phil, please visit philgrahamdigital.com/podcast.